of 2021. And so let's just, first of all, thank you. And then let's back up to what you initially read or saw that started to take you down, the world into the research that has really been, I'm sure, your life's work.
Yeah. Well, summer 2020, I was going through kind of a transition, and I started paying attention to what was going on in Portland.
Yes.
With the fucking DHS and the cops and everybody collaborating to, riot against protesters
Yeah.
in Portland. And so I was really interested in what was causing this conflict, because it was scary. It was obviously radicalization. I noticed QAnon. I had been vaguely tracking it, before that. But an old colleague of mine named Adrian Hahn wrote a piece
Right.
that said QAnon is an ARG, is an alternate reality game. And that, I'd sort of heard things like that in the past. I was not a big into 4chan culture and all that shit before. So I came into it sort of fresh. And, I looked at it and I was like, yep, it's an ARG. But it's an ARG that is resulting in a death cult. I mean, for a long time, all the QAnon people were like attacking Chrissy Teigen and shit for being, child eating, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just ridiculous. But Twitter kind of cut that off at one point and sort of segmented them into their own corner of Twitter. So you could kind of escape it, but I went over there to look, and the first half an hour I spent there changed my life, because I saw hundreds of thousands of people, at a time, literally chanting the same horrid, racist, homophobic, just misogynistic garbage over and over again. And it was like, holy shit, this is an ARG that's brainwashing people. I mean, I could tell, like, right away. The second story I wrote was 2 weeks after I started, and it was QAnon is an enormous ARG run by malevolent puppet masters. And I had Jim Watkins and Chanel Rion from OAN and Mike fucking Flynn on the cover.
Wow. Already 2 weeks in. Wow.
And,
Wow.
at that point, I was focusing on Jim Watkins because there were a lot of people, because he was the one who was running the website. And I figured, well, shit, if he's running the website where this Q LARP, live action role play, is going on, he must be, if not Q, he's at least the gateway to it, right? And that turned out to be true. And I also pointed out all the obvious Russian connections to Mike Flynn, to OAN, to all these places that were pushing these lies. So it was really clear right away. But as soon as I started mentioning Russian influence, as soon as I started talking about Mike Flynn, as soon as I went, out of this sort of narrow zone, of inquiry about it, that's when all the attacks started. And honestly, that was my clue that I knew that I was
That
right.
you were right. And I think that work of people like you. Back then, I think that there was probably some cloak and dagger stuff going on. And because of your background and your experience and your ability to actually, look at this stuff and see what's behind it, I don't think they had anticipated somebody like you coming through and doing the type of investigation you had done, because as we know, they had already put their controlled opposition in place. And so
I mean, it was there. It was there from the beginning.
Right. It's an important point. It's an important point that the media is still very asleep at the switch when it comes to who and what the controlled opposition are, what they look like, what they do, in trying to obfuscate the truth about this radicalization, setup.
Yeah, I mean, and you say this often. There are no rear areas, right? Like I I thought I had found a group of people who were interested in QAnon and wanted to expose it, but it didn't turn out that way. It turned out they were there to protect it, and they were there to protect it from people like me. And I refused to shut up. And 2.5 years later, I have the fucking scars all over me. I'm still here.
Can you tell people how you tried to help, how you got connected with Dave Troy and Dr. Stephen Hassan, who works to help get people help who are under undue influence? Can you tell me how that led to the Thinkin' Project and wanting to actually give people help to de-radicalize their loved ones, or if they had been under undue influence? Because you initially tried to help, like with many great things. Let's just talk about the Women's March, Standing Rock, the Resistance, whatever. You got infiltrated, and there are scars from that, but you actually were setting out to try to help people.
Yeah, I mean, I met Dave through Stephen Hassan. So within, I don't know, I think the first time I replied to Stephen on Twitter was like a week after I started. Because instantly I knew, oh my God, there are millions of these brainwashed people, and you could just tell right away that like they would shut down. And I knew some stuff about cults because I'd been interested in it, and it was clearly brainwashing. And I thought to myself, holy fuck, how are we going to get tens of millions of people unbrainwashed, right? And so I, just looking around, figured out that man, Dr. Hassan, who wasn't a doctor at the time, by the way. Yeah, so he was in the Moonies and also wrote a book called Cult of Trump, which describes this brainwashing process, within the MAGA cult, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, because I was immediately at, what's the solution to this, right? Yeah. It was obvious. This is it's some kind of, and at the time I didn't necessarily have, like in the first week. I didn't necessarily have the words for psychological operation, but it became super clear that that's what it was, and that the psychological operation was brainwashing people. And I knew immediately that we were going to need to figure out how to help all those people.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Wow.
so I met Dr. Hassan that way and worked with Dave. I've been working with Dave the entire time.
Yeah.
But he introduced us because he knew Dave from TEDx.
It's just
So
because you've been following the messaging and because of who you saw being installed into the Pentagon. So you knew.
yes,
Yeah.
I did. I knew from their private messages and I also had hundreds of sources that have
Okay.
in
Wow.
various places because
Amazing.
and many of them turned out to be ops, to be honest. But I learn
Mhm.
as much from the ops as I do from anybody else.
Well, they
Um,
too want to tell a truth too. They too have a
well,
hard time. Yeah.
they will tell you partial truths,
Yeah.
and the whole project here for me has been, how do you unfuck the record, right? Because it's been layered in nonsense for
Mhm.
years, right?
Mhm.
There's been 150 different, uh, who is Q theories,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
All designed to distract you from the actual
Obfuscate.
truth, which is
Right.
very, very simple. There's one man who did the entire thing from beginning to end, and he's still doing it. And he was let back on Twitter by Elmo on the anniversary of January 6th.
Which was one big huge
There is
cataclysm.
I cannot think of a more aggressive attack on the on the United States of America that Elon Musk could do right now, other than maybe, I don't know, crashing his satellites into the space station or some shit. Like, he let Mike Flynn, who is currently shopping a psyops book designed to create civil war, in his pinned tweet.
Close out. I'm going to read you one paragraph from our first Byline Times article. Mike Flynn is the psyops guy in the general. Roger Stone spreads the propaganda on various media outlets, along with Steve Bannon, who brings the billionaires and runs enormous targeting and propaganda operations. Eric Prince trains everybody and executes specific targeting operations from training centers in Wyoming, North Carolina, and Virginia. He trains physical troopers, but he also trains psychological terrorists. Peter Thiel founded MAGA 3X, which was the group that started QAnon.
I mean, still right.
I think it was also very important that moment that you looked at Facebook when you were first initially doing this investigation and you saw how radicalized people you knew had become. I think it's very important for me that I never forget that we do this work, in the hopes that we can have some sort of, impact on, humanity in our small way, but it's also very personal.
Yeah, I mean, so I'd been looking into this cult for a couple of weeks, and I hadn't been to Facebook in a long time because it was such a shithole.
Yeah.
But I went back there, just to kind of check in and see what was going on. It was like, oh my God, like a bunch of people I knew, some distant relatives, other people were QAnon
Yeah.
members,
Yeah.
like a lot, and not only that, but their extended families. Like it was infiltrating the entire thing.
Yeah.
I wrote a Medium article called "QAnon is coming for you and your family"
Yeah. That is very
because
true.
I wanted to be very clear. And in the meantime, since I wrote that, I don't know, another 20-25% of America has been captured by
Hmm.
this death cult. I mean, at that point, QAnon itself was still not a giant story, but quickly became one.